Welcome to The Explainer. Imagine this, one single bad bet, and an entire nation's economy is on the brink of collapse. It sounds wild, right? Well, in 1907, it almost happened. This is the incredible story of a financial panic so severe, it took one of the most powerful men in history to single-handedly stop it.
So, back in 1907, the US economy was an absolute powerhouse, a real titan of industry. But, and this is a big but, its financial system had this massive vulnerability. There was no central bank. Just think about that for a second. It's like a high wire act with absolutely no safety net below. And, well, someone was about to start shaking that wire. All right, so the whole thing kicks off in the middle of October, and it starts with this incredibly audacious stock manipulation scheme. You've got two brothers who are convinced they have this foolproof plan, but what they actually did was light the fuse on a financial bomb that was about to go off nationwide. So the guy behind the plan was Otto Heinz, the brother of a big shot copper magnate named F. Augustus Heinz, and their idea was to pull off what's called a short squeeze on their own company's stock. The game plan was pretty simple. They thought they controlled most of the shares, so they figured they could force anyone betting against them to buy the shares back at a ridiculously inflated price. Easy money, right? Yeah, about that easy money. The Heinz brothers had made one teeny tiny critical mistake. Turns out, there were way more shares floating around than they ever realized. And just like that, in a dizzying 48 hours, their brilliant scheme completely and spectacularly imploded. Otto and his brokerage firm totally wiped out. Now, you'd think a failed stock scheme would be a contained explosion, right? Just one company going down. But this is Wall Street we're talking about, where everything is connected to everything else. And this failure, it started to spread like a virus, leaping from the stock market and heading straight for the heart of the banking system.
And this is where you can really see the dominoes start to fall. Otto's bankruptcy sends this massive shockwave of fear rippling through the entire system. People totally panicked. Depositors started rushing to pull their money out of any bank that had even the slightest connection to the Heinz name. You had this group of banks, the New York Clearinghouse, that tried to build a firewall, by forcing out the main guys involved. But it was too late. The fire was already spreading.
Okay, so the crisis is spreading, and it's about to find the system's absolute weakest link. It's about to make a huge jump from the somewhat regulated world of commercial banks into what was basically the Wild West of finance, the trust companies. And folks, this is where that little spark turns into a raging inferno. You see, trusts were kind of the shadow banks of their day. They played by a different set of rules. Fewer rules, really. And here's the kicker. They kept very, very little cash on hand. So while national banks had to keep a 25% cash cushion for emergencies, these trusts were just skating by with maybe 5%. That meant if people started asking for their money back all at once, well, they were dangerously, incredibly vulnerable. And then it happened. The president of the Knickerbocker Trust, we're talking one of the biggest trusts in New York, gets linked to the Heinz brothers' failed scheme. And that was it. The dam just broke. Depositors literally stormed the bank, and in just a few hours, it completely collapsed. What started as a little fight on Wall Street had just morphed into a full-blown, system-wide crisis. At this point, confidence was just gone, completely shattered. The market went into an absolute freefall. The New York Stock Exchange lost nearly half its value. This wasn't just a bad day or even a bad week on Wall Street. No, this was a giant, flashing red light signaling that the entire financial system was teetering on the edge of collapse. So the nation is on the brink of financial ruin. There's no central bank to call for help, no emergency button to press. In this moment of total chaos, the entire system turned to one person for salvation. The powerful, the intimidating, the immensely wealthy financier, J.P. Morgan. The panic was basically starving the system of cash. The credit markets completely froze. Think about it. The overnight loans that brokers need just to keep the stock exchange running, their interest rates went from a normalish 9.5% all the way up to an impossible 100%. The engine of American finance was grinding to a halt. Morgan saw exactly what was happening. He knew the entire system was at risk of this cascading failure where one bank brings down another and another. So he just took charge. He started personally auditing the books of these struggling firms, basically deciding on the spot who could be saved and who had to be left to fail.
He was performing financial triage, but for the whole country. I mean, Morgan basically became a one-man central bank. It's incredible. He rounded up the resources of Wall Street, he convinced the US government to deposit federal funds, and he single-handedly propped up not just the stock exchange, but he even saved New York City from going bankrupt. His actions were just so swift and so decisive. But the real climax of the whole crisis, wow, it's like something out of a movie. To save the last of the struggling trusts, Morgan gathers the country's most powerful bankers into his library, and then he locks the door. He refused to let a single one of them leave until they all agreed to pony up the money for a rescue package. He literally held them hostage to save the American economy. You can't make this stuff up. And just like that, the panic was over. But it left behind this absolutely chilling realization. The fate of the world's biggest economy had come down to the will of one single private citizen. It was a terrifying gamble, one that America realized it could never, ever afford to take again. So the Panic of 1907 really served as a massive wake-up call. It laid bare all the fatal flaws in the American financial system for everyone to see. This near-death experience, it finally pushed Congress into action. And sure enough, just 6 years later, the Federal Reserve System was born. You know, it's fascinating how the events of 1907 just echo through history. Think about it. That crisis started in those less regulated trust companies. Just like the 2008 crisis really kicked off in the so-called shadow banking system. It's really a timeless lesson, isn't it? It shows how financial trouble can start on the fringes and spread right to the very core of the system. So the Panic of 1907 was stopped, and it did lead to some absolutely crucial reforms. But it still leaves us with this big, lingering question. A century later, our financial world is infinitely more complex, more global, more interconnected than ever before. So have we really built a system that can withstand the raw, primal force of human panic? Or is the next big crisis just one bad bet away?